Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of An Amber a Day, the Functional Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Fisher, and I am here today with Jana. Jana, how do you pronounce your last name?
Jamail.
Jana Jamail, and she is on Instagram as Heard It From Rose, and she is a great fellow nutritionist. She focuses on cardiology and heart health in her practice. And so we're going to talk a lot today about that, and then just also about both being nutritionists with little babies and the balancing of all that stuff. And yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of things today. So it should be a good one.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Of course, I'm excited that you're here. So what we were talking about before I started recording is how one of Jana's goals is to be in a cardiologist's office, actually providing nutrition services to their patients. Because what were you saying about wait times with procedures and everything?
Yeah, so if you have, it's not just if you have like high blood pressure or high cholesterol, but it's say that you actually have blockage and you need a stint or you need to go in and actually have a procedure, some wait times can be 6 to 8 months. And if you don't change anything that you're doing over that course, I mean, there are risks of heart attack in that amount of time. And so I was saying that I would love to find, this open-minded cardiologist that would love to work with me and then would love to actually have me work with some of those patients, change their diet. And over that 6 to 8 month period, that could even reduce their need for procedures or surgeries and even medication. But yeah, it would take a very open-minded cardiologist.
Yeah. And so I think, what's cool about that is that I actually do think, maybe this is just because I am so involved in the functional medicine world now, but I feel like this is changing. It's interesting that you and I are talking today because earlier this week, I finished up a lecture for my certification it was a cardiometabolic lecture. So it was all about, it was mostly about insulin resistance and heart disease, which of course there's a lot of, overlap with that and everything, and diet and all that. And they were talking about, statins and cholesterol numbers and how these things really, it's like almost as if like when you look at somebody's cholesterol, for example, the LDL, it's not as simple as like LDL is bad and HDL is good. Yeah. It depends on the molecule size of the LDL and all that. I don't work a lot with cardiovascular stuff, so you probably know a lot more about me. So maybe you could explain some of that to us. But I know there's a lot of overlap with my clientele with that as well, because like when we're working on fertility and hormone issues, especially PCOS, there's that underlying insulin resistance. And there's also a higher risk for, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease. Those things kind of all go together with that metabolic syndrome. So, yeah, to your point about like, I think there are some really cool cardiologists out there who are really interested in those overplays of nutrition and heart disease, but there really should be a lot more. For how much we know, there should be a lot more.
But the thing I have found, so almost all of my clients are heart disease clients in some way, shape, or form. They have high triglycerides, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. One of my first clients when I started doing this, he came to me and said, my doctor said I'm going to have a heart attack in a year if I don't make a change. And he was just panicking. And I told him, if I'm not panicking, you're not panicking. We can do this. Like, it's fine. And I put him on a plant-based diet. And in 3 months, he was off his statins.
Wow.
And in 6 months, he was off all of his blood pressure medication. And he was like, you gave me my entire life back. And he was like, I just don't understand. Why didn't my cardiologist know this? Which his cardiologist did know to have him call me, which is interesting. But I said, cardiologists don't take nutrition courses, but they have to go to seminars from pharmaceutical companies, and they get paid if they put you on a statin. So you going to take nutrition where you get nothing, or are you going to get paid $5,000 per statin prescription? It's just incentive, right? Yeah. So it's been interesting over the years, just seeing how there's so much medication people can be put on, and it's just start eating your greens and just decrease some of those animal products, and you'll be amazed at how your heart just bounces back so fast.
Isn't that so funny too? I mean, just diet intervention makes such a big difference, and just particularly the plant content of the diet, you know, because most of the clients that I'm working with, they're not, you know, in the space to go completely vegetarian or vegan, but we get them to where the balance of the diet is far more in favor of plants.
Sure.
And it makes such a huge difference. And I think what's frustrating for me as a nutritionist too is like people often ask me, they're like, okay, what do I need to do to, you know, to help with this or to help with that? And so often the answer is just eat more veggies, you know, but that's not fun and flashy and like cool. It's not an awesome supplement to recommend or something. And it's not easy either. It's like simple, but it's not easy. So oftentimes people don't want to hear that, you know, but I think when they do finally open up to the idea that food does play a role in their health, it's just amazing what turnarounds we can see, particularly with medications. I get asked similar questions a lot about metformin because a lot of my clients are on metformin, you know, and it's similar to a statin in the sense that if you can take care of your diet and really, really work on your nutrient density, often you don't need metformin anymore because your body can do that. You know, that insulin resistance issue can be fixed.
Yeah.
With a lifestyle-based approach. I mean, so many of our chronic diseases these days are lifestyle-based diseases.
Yes.
But why are we not told that? You know, we're told it's genetic predisposition and, you know, my dad had heart disease and my mom had heart disease. And so that's why I have heart disease. Like, well, your dad and your mom and you probably all eat very similar as well.
Yes. I tell people all the time, yes, you can have higher LDL naturally, right?
Sure.
But heart disease in and of itself is not genetic. What you put on your plate seems to be hereditary though, because we just learn this way and we continue. But the second you break the cycle, things change.
Yeah.
And
right.
So I'm not surprised that people who eat the exact same way for years and years and generations all have the same problems.
Yeah, right. It's not surprising.
Capitalism doesn't work very well with fruits and vegetables, unfortunately.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, unfortunately, that's not the stuff that we subsidize.
Yeah.
The nation. You know, we're subsidizing dairy products and corn.
Yes.
So, and the meat industry.
So why we can't make a whole lot off of them? And
yeah, I know there's a lot of systemic stuff that I don't talk a ton about. Just because I don't know, it's my number one focus is just to, when I get with a person, to kind of change their mind and change the way that and I feel like people, when they fight for these things with their money, right? So if they make changes, and I think you can see that over time as well, because the way people eat now versus when I was growing up, it's like, yes, in some ways, like the standard American diet has gotten worse, but the health kind of, what am I trying to say? That the health industry has kind of also gotten bigger, and there's more products options. Like there's more gluten-free things available now. There's more, it's like people are kind of like more interested in that kind of stuff. There's Whole Foods at different places where there weren't. So I do see some positive changes with that. And I feel like it's just like one person at a time, at least for me, but also there needs to be more, more like support in legislature and all that for all of these things too. Infrastructure change is huge. I mean, the way that we grow fruits and vegetables needs to change, you know?
And I think people knew that if you just eat differently, and, you know, I feel like that's also a privilege, right? Not everyone in a socioeconomic situation can follow those guidelines. It's not, I mean, there's food deserts, you know, soda is cheaper than water. You know, that's not the same across the board. But I feel like if that education was out there, that you don't have to have type 2 diabetes, you don't have to have heart disease, you don't have to have obesity. A lot of these things are our own creation. I just wonder how healthier as a country we would be.
Yeah, we would be, I mean, it would be an amazing change. And I think you can see other countries at similar kind of economic development levels who don't eat the way we do. And the quality of life there is better. They have more, they don't spend as much money on healthcare, not nearly as much money on healthcare. And so they're able to provide more for their citizens. They're able to, have more leisure time, go more places because they have more expendable income because they're not spending it on medical bills. I mean, it's like, it's a whole systemic problem. They're not spending their money on pharmaceuticals. It's just, and to your point too about genetics, I hear that a lot in practice too. I have a lot of times people come in and they're like, well, I have type 2 diabetes, but my family has, everyone in my family has it. And so it's genetic for me. Genetics are not like this static thing that never changes, or like you don't inherit a gene and then just automatically have that issue. There's like 25% say is the predisposition that you inherit. And then the other 75% is your environment. And so, with type 2 diabetes, I mean, there's a lot of evidence for like different, big stressors on the body happening, in childhood or like in adulthood that can kind of trigger that process to start. It's not like, I mean, if it were truly, truly just genetic only, then you'd have it from birth. Like you would just be born with type 2 diabetes, and you're not, you develop it. So, I don't know, that I feel like that's such defeatist thinking too. It's like this, my friend and I were talking about this the other day, this idea of like victimization in health, where you almost take on your diagnosis as a part of your personality. Yeah. And it's very hard to separate yourself from that, because it's much easier to think, well, this is not, I don't play any role in this. Like I have no responsibility here. So like, let me just continue on the way I am. But I think a lot of people do often reach the point where they're just sick of feeling bad, and they're ready to kind of take some responsibility for the fact that like, hey, yes, when you don't know better, you can't do better, right? But now that you do, you have a responsibility to start taking better care of yourself.
Well, and I think it's so interesting too, because like you said, if you had it, you'd be born with it, right? And people don't understand that, like, say you have cheese and blueberries in front of you. Those turn on and off genes in your body depending on what you eat. And you have more control than you realize. Gene expression happens all the time. It just depends on what you put in your body. And I tell my clients all the time, like, let's turn on the genes we need right now. Let's work on those things right now, because they're not working in your favor. And so I want people to know, like, you have control over your health. It's not just, oh, I have heart disease, I have it forever. Like, you can take your life back.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And I know that we live in this time and this society when saying things like that is almost considered to be like, people don't like to hear that because they're not ready for that. Like, they're not ready to own up to their piece in that puzzle. Yeah. But I feel like most of the people who are probably listening to this are sort of like, yes, I'm ready to do something about this situation. And if that's you, I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that you're getting some insight. But I think, obviously as nutritionists, we're always going to say that the single biggest thing that you can do for your health is to take better care of what you eat. Yes. It just is kind of a
huge advocate of sleep.
That too. That's the second pillar,
it's just
right?
Food and sleep.
Yeah, we're always talking about in functional medicine. It's like it's anything that you take in. So food, water, obviously, and then air quality is huge. I mean, I don't even get in a lot into like environmental toxins and stuff like that, which can play that's a whole other thing that I should probably do a podcast on sometime. And then sleep. Yeah. If you don't sleep at least 8 hours, yeah. Especially if you're trying to heal.
That's essential to your health right there. I mean, just daylight saving. What happens during that time when you lose just 1 hour of sleep? Like, car accidents go up. I mean, heart attacks go up, and it's 1 hour. But it is more in that one day than over the entire course of the year. And but why don't we talk about that?
I know. I don't know. I think too that there's all this pressure in at least American society to kind of like be such an achiever and to just wake up at the crack of dawn and exercise. And when I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, if it's between you getting 8 hours of sleep and you waking up to exercise, I'd rather you sleep, honestly.
Yes.
And then just like, I don't know, stand up during the day more,
Move your body.
yeah, just like move around if that's all you can do. And I understand, okay, like I am overwhelmed right now in my life. So I get how it's hard to fit that stuff in. And sometimes we just have to be there. I don't think that that's like a badge of honor, but I also understand how it can happen. But yeah, you've got to sleep. Whenever I can't tell you how many people I see who are doing that whole wake up at 4 a.m. thing to exercise and then go to work. And they are seriously paying the consequences of that. They think they're doing the right thing. And it's just messing with so much with weight, water retention, hormones, like stress responses, even things like food sensitivities and stuff start developing when your body's really stressed out. So,
well, and it affects your brain later in life too. Like Ronald Reagan followed this. And I mean, he had early onset dementia later in life. Most of these people, it catches up with them later in life. Like truly sleep is the one thing you just have to have, and you just can't give it up. Yeah. And I don't think people yeah, you're right. It's such a badge of honor to be like, I don't sleep. But to me, that's like, why would you do that to yourself?
Yeah, why? I know. And if you do have trouble sleeping, and because a lot of people that I work with, they sure try to get their 8 hours or whatever, and they just can't. I mean, that's indicative of a deeper issue that needs to be addressed. It's probably a cortisol imbalance, or it could be sleep hygiene, right? Like sometimes people don't realize that the blue light that they're exposed to at night, watching TV, being on their phone can be causing issues with that. But in a lot of cases, at least the people that I work with, it's kind of that deeper problem with either, blood sugar, insulin balance, or with cortisol, like a reversed rhythm with cortisol. So if you are trying to get sleep and you can't, there are things that can be done to address that. And you might want to think about working with a nutritionist on that. I think we don't think about sleep as being a nutrition issue, but it really kind of is. I know that with my clients, it's like as soon as they start eating better, all of a sudden they're just like, they're exhausted, like they're ready to sleep at night and they can sleep for hours. And I'm like, yes, give your body's trying to catch up. Let it. Sleep 9 hours if you need to, just
when you
heal while you sleep.
Processed foods, isn't it amazing how all of a sudden you can fall asleep and stay asleep?
Yeah.
Like, your blood sugar is not spiking in the middle of the night, waking you up. Like oh yes. Since people obviously don't know this, but I did IUI and IVF and it did not work, but I've just had estrogen dominance ever since that. And I know when I haven't had enough progesterone on the second part of my cycle, because I get night sweats, I'm constantly waking up, and I'm like, this is torture. Yeah. Like, and it's awful. Not night. Like, I don't think people who don't have night sweats, you probably don't understand that it's not like you wake up sweating. It's like you're in a pool and you don't know how you got there.
So you wake up and you're like literally soaked all over. The bed it's gross. Yes. It's just it's an icky feeling.
Like I have to get up and change, and I'm like, what is happening?
I know. Well, to speak to that, because so many people who listen to me do have estrogen dominance. The whole reason that I ended up having to have the hysterectomy was because of estrogen dominance. I mean, that's the whole reason I had to go through IVF in the first place as well.
Yes,
we've both been through IVF. But all those hormones and all that synthetic stuff being pumped, I mean, it can turn on those genes that we were talking about, and if you are like me and you were born with kind of a poorer than average detox capacity, it's like you have to try extra hard to get that stuff out of there. There's things that you can do for that, but it doesn't negate the fact that like it's a bit more of a battle for sure than somebody else might have. but yeah, I mean, so hormone replacement therapy has been a real, like, I was told because I didn't have a uterus anymore that I shouldn't be on progesterone. And I used to be on bioidenticals and really liked that and felt really great on it. And it was just like, I was like craving it. I would dream about taking, I had some extra like old pills and stuff, and I would dream about taking them. Like my body knew that that's what I needed. So anyway, one night I just broke down and I was like, I'm just going to take some of this because I just need to see if I'm right. And I slept for like 10 hours. I mean, my body was just craving that progesterone so badly. So yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about the connection between hormones and insomnia and anxiety. Estrogen is an upper, it makes us very wired. And especially if we have too much in the right quantities, it gives us energy and makes us feel like vibrant and healthy and all those good things. So it's not that we don't want any at all, but the balance of it is so important.
Yeah. And we know that use a progesterone cream with vitamin D. That has been life-changing for me. But I mean, I had some pretty bad moments. Like I was on a progesterone cream before this one. I was a raging jerk on it. And I was like, what is going on with me? And it wasn't until I was like, maybe I had finished it and I couldn't find it anymore. So my OB was like, oh, just try this one. And I was like, why am I not a psychopath anymore? What's going on?
Isn't that weird? I know, it's amazing because especially if you're a person who's prone to kind of estrogen dominance issues, and we often talk about, like with detoxification in particular, people who are kind of poor detoxers, they tend to have more of these kinds of hormonal issues because we're supposed to get that stuff out through the stool and whatever, and we just rebind it and reabsorb it. And anyway, it's a cycle. But if we're hypersensitive to medications, that's also a sign of having poor detox capacity. So it's interesting too, because hormone replacements and hormone therapies, they can affect you like different ways.
Yes.
If you're hypersensitive to it. I'm the same way. Like when I went through IVF, how they like to put you on like birth control before they start.
Yes.
The one that they picked for me, oh my gosh, I'm not kidding, made me like, I actually was having suicidal thoughts. I had to get off of it.
Oh my gosh.
And I called the doctor's office and I'm like, look, this is not like me. I'm not a person, I'm not trying to say this to be, I don't know, to speak poorly of people who have depression, but I'm not a person with depression. I don't struggle with this. And since I have started this medication, I have been thinking about driving off the road into the abyss, that's not like me. I don't know where these thoughts are coming from. It was very weird. And they were like, no, birth control doesn't do that. Like, okay. So,
I mean, if you Google it, it will tell you.
Literally Google it. Yeah. I mean, so many women have experiences with birth control causing really weird side effects. Like if you're sensitive to medications, especially a birth control that's, a higher dosage like Yaz or Yasmin, those, they really mess with a lot of people. So
I mean, rage. Like when they told me you have to go on birth control for IVF, I was like, yeah, we're not going to do that for the safety of society.
Yeah.
It's not okay. Like things will happen. My husband was like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? I'm like, you don't want to know.
It's sad. I know. The only ones that ever like worked okay for me was like low estrogen, like the lowest possible dose that you could get. That one was like, okay, I'm like still kind of like depressed, but not miserable. But same thing when I had cancer when I was younger, the treatment for that was to go on very high dose progestin therapy, not progesterone, but synthetic progestin. And that's really the difference I found, because the bioidentical progesterone, I feel great on that. Like, if you're on quite a bit of it, progesterone does have this, it's kind of muscle relaxant. So it makes you it makes you sleepy. It can make you kind of tired. It can make you hungry. It can make you retain a little bit of water. Those kinds of things are normal. I mean, any woman who has a cycle is going to go through highs and lows in her cycle like that. And that's progesterone. But the synthetics really just was not the same. Yeah. When I was on, it was called Megace that I had to take. And when I was on that, oh boy, did not want to mess with me, and like my hair was falling out, and like it was just it was an interesting experience.
Yeah,
let's say I know when I was done with that, I was like, please, never again. I don't ever want to take this again, you know. I don't know. So
yeah, the hormones are fun.
are so fun. So yeah, you guys adopted, didn't you?
Yes, we adopted our son out of foster care.
That's so cool.
He's 2.5 now, which is, if you know anything about foster care, he's a unicorn. That does not happen. You do not get his age.
How old was he when you guys got him into the home?
So we found out about him when he was 16 months. And then, so the process typically is you find out, you get their file, you have 24 hours to say, we want to have a call with his team. So all the teams come together on a phone call. If you say, okay, yes, I want to do this, you have another 24 hours. And then they say, you still want to do it, right? And we say yes. And then you typically go visit them for the first time. Then you come home, then you plan another time to visit. And then the third time they come stay in your home. And then you plan a day for them to come home forever. That is not what happened to us. Like our whole situation is just a unicorn situation. Found out about him. A week later, we got his file. The next day we had a call. We said yes. And they said, great, this is a Monday. You need to be in Dallas Thursday. You're going to meet him. You're going to take him home forever Friday. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. And they said his foster situation is breaking down, which is social worker, nice way of saying get him out as soon as possible. So I hung up on a Monday and just drove to Target, and I was like, I live here now, so just give me everything. Like my my mom was so sweet. She goes, what's the theme for his room? I'm like, whatever is available at Target. There's no theme. So I built his room in a day. Like my husband's at work, I'm building a crib, a rocking chair, putting it all together. I have no clue what size clothes he wears, so I just bought them all because I don't know. I didn't know what diaper size he wore. Like we had training in foster situations for 5 and older. And I'm getting a 17-month-old, and I'm like, I have a niece who was this age at one time, but this is not the same. So
were you guys licensed for like 5 and up, or were you licensed for like 0 to 5?
We aren't licensed because we didn't foster to adopt. His rights were terminated. And so his was straight adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I tell you that I used to be a foster parent trainer, foster and adoptive.
So you understand what I meant, like his foster situation is breaking down.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying like, yikes, this isn't working out. We're gonna have to move him somewhere else if you don't take him.
Yes.
Which you don't want to do with a child that young, of course, because any movement before 3 years of age is like major. So as few moves as possible. Was he in any other was that the only home that he had been in?
That was his only home, and thank God. But he was in a home with 9 other adults and 3 other children. So when he came to us, he's like, well, this is the most boring house on the planet. It's usually people and a dog. But he has definitely adapted to his home and the luxury of his home now very quickly.
Yeah. I'm sure he has.
Like I set him up on the couch to watch Daniel Tiger on a flat screen with popcorn, and he's just like laid out, like living. I'm like, you're fine. Like you're good.
So did you guys did you go through a private agency, or did you go through like were you wanting to do foster or foster to adopt, or you just wanted to do straight adoption? Or I'm just curious. I might cut this out of the podcast. I'm just really curious.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So I did fertility treatments. It was both my husband and I, because I had ovarian cysts, still do. I've had 2 or 3 surgeries for them, which apparently I'm also a unicorn. That's not normal. So
Yeah.
cool.
I'm with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did fertility treatments for probably almost a year. And I was just like, I can't do the hormones and I just can't do this anymore. And I have always wanted to adopt, and my husband has 3 adopted cousins. So in his mind, adoption has always been on the table. So at first we thought of doing international adoption because we were afraid of doing an open adoption with a birth mother because we had heard horror stories. And we thought maybe that would be an easier situation for a child to bond with us.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to adopt from Bulgaria. That took 2 years, and I finally figured out this is not happening. Once that happened, I found this agency called GladMe. And my husband's 9 years older than me. So we were kind of past the point of like, okay, you know what, let's get a 5-year-old. Like he was about to be 40 at the time. We were like, let's not get an infant, maybe an older child would be better for us. Anyway, we can skip the diaper situation. Like, that didn't happen. And so yeah, we called GladMe, which they're out of Texas, but they work all over the country. And I literally talked to the director, and she was like, fill out the paperwork tonight and I will get you in, because they only accept so many families at one time. And so we filled out the paperwork that night, and the next morning she's like, get all these documents into me and then you're going to go to training. And I was so wanting to be a mom. They say it takes like 6 months to get your documents in. No, 4 weeks. I'm like, yeah, it's done. I also had a lot from our Bulgaria adoption. That helped. And then, yeah, we started, our training it's 35 hours. And I mean, your first class is on sexual assault and sexual abuse of these kids. And it's like, if you can make it through day 1, you're good to go. But it's horrifying. Like, you cry a lot because you're like, who does this to children? Mm-hmm. And then, so we finished our course in July or August. And then they told us it could be a 6-month wait, and we got matched in November. And then we had our first call in December, and we brought him home in January. So literally like 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was
That's
quick.
So cool.
Yeah.
He was meant for you.
That's yes, so cool. For sure. He is my husband's mini, for sure. They're the exact same person.
Wow.
See, even look alike. People are like, oh, your son looks exactly like your husband. I'm like, oh, I know. It freaks me out every day.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, I did that for, I don't know, it was like about 4 years, but I worked for the state of Texas, and I had all of Region 1. I was the only recruiter in all of Region 1, which is like the whole panhandle. Yeah. So I would just like go drive around trying to find like nice people I did a lot of work through churches and things like that, trying to find people who were interested in foster or foster to adopt, and then training them. You know, I was the one who would go through all those trainings that you went through. I would teach all of them, and then help do the home studies and get them licensed and all that. And then I moved to a private agency and did just the training portion and not the licensing portion for a while. So yeah, I had to teach all those classes and all that.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's hard to put people through that because they're so innocent when they come in. Yeah. And then you have to like really jade them with all these like crazy, classes. But it's true. And I mean, especially when it comes to like sexual abuse in kids, there are so many people who are just really not willing to take a child that has experienced any kind of sexual abuse, just because of the potential implications with that. And I mean, there's a lot of things that go into determining what's right for your family and all that, and I totally get it. But it was always really sad to me how left out a lot of those kids ended up being, because people were just like really scared of that,
So I think you'll find this interesting. So at GladMe, they pretty much make you agree to being acceptable of some level, because they're like, you won't always know until they end up in your home.
Yeah.
And so they try to educate you that there are so many different degrees of it, that if you say no to any level of sexual abuse, you're probably not going to adopt anyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's like what child, I mean, honestly, from my experience at least, I don't know of a child, or it's very, very rare to come across a child that has not had at least some experience with that, that's been in the foster care system.
Yeah.
It's just because either their home environment or then in the foster care system, sometimes there's abuse that happens. So it's just like, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's very sad. And we've thought about adopting at some point as well. So I'm just like always really interested to ask people who have actually done it, you know, that weren't like people that I helped train.
It's hard. I'm just gonna be very honest. I was telling one of my friends, I mean, it took me over a year to be even comfortable being a mom.
Yeah.
And it took him and I a really long time to fully bond. And that had so much to do with my own stuff and then his stuff that he had come with. And I would say in the last 3 months, we've bonded so much, and it's just like a completely different relationship. But when you are just constantly trying to bond with a child and you are struggling, but you watch them willingly bond with your spouse, I mean, it kills you daily.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't we have this? And, you know, it's a patience thing, and eventually they may or may not get there. You know, every kid is different for sure, but I would always be envious of my friends who had children. It was like, you bonded with them immediately. And I had to apply for a child, and I have background checks, and I had to take classes. And then now that I have a child, it's not like we love each other. Instead, it's like, I have to work 10 times as hard now to prove you can trust me and I'm your mom. So there's, you know, it's hard being an adoptive parent because, not that birth is a fairy tale. Birthing a child is not a fairy tale, right? That's so difficult. But it's just a very different bonding experience. You know, the other thing that's hard is it's not an instant love. Like, you know, I have no idea who he is when I meet him. And not that, I mean, you birth a child, you don't know who they are either, right? Like, either way, two strangers are coming into our homes, right? We don't know who they are. But I feel like because I don't get that chemical love that comes from just having a biological response, I've had to work really hard to learn how to love him. And so, and that sounds so mean, but if, you know, it's just like meeting a stranger, you're getting to know them. Like, you don't fall in love with someone when you first meet them. But so that was hard. And then when you do start falling in love with things about them, then you're rejected. So you're like, I don't even know what to do with this now. But you live here, so okay.
I guess we're stuck together.
Yeah, so I guess we're doing, and you know, and it's funny because looking back, my husband's like, I love on our dog. My dog is my first child. I think she's perfect. I love her so much. And he's like, our son is so jealous of your relationship with our dog Piper. And I want to be like, 'cause she loved me back. Like, I needed her. And it's, you know, it's to no fault of his own. And luckily they love each other now. So, but yeah, it's a very different learning experience.
I really appreciate you being like open and upfront about that, because, you know, that was the experience that a lot of the people that I worked with had, you know, and I feel like that's more common than not, but yet we have this sort of like very idealized idea of what adoption looks like and how you're just gonna like immediately like bond with this baby and like, or this child and love them from like day one. And it's like, I mean, even I have friends too who they didn't bond with their babies that they birthed themselves for months, you know, like some people don't bond with their baby till their baby smiles at them. Like, there are all these different chemical things that happen. But I mean, we should just be a little bit more honest about this stuff, because motherhood is just hard in general. But like, you know, it's okay to not have it. It's your own story is unique, and it's okay for it to be unique. You know, it doesn't have to follow some Disney idea of what adoption looks like, you know, like you're his mom. And
it's, you know, I have to prove to him every day he can trust me. And, you know, that's just become my norm now. So it doesn't feel hard, but it used to be like, this is the hardest thing in the world. And then I always felt like I should be so grateful that I'm a mom now because of everything we've gone through. But like, it's still a struggle. Like, it's okay to want something and then finally get it, and it still be really hard. And I think people don't understand that maybe. And then during the pandemic, like, I lost almost all of my clients because they couldn't afford me. So then I had to go through the process of grieving my business life while trying to convince this kid I love him and I'm his mom. But all of that on the other side, it's interesting because it really changed my focus into what I want to do. And I finally came to the realization that I love being a mom, but that's not enough for me.
Thank you so much to Jana for being a part of today's episode of An Amber Day, the Functional Nutrition Podcast. I will put the contact information for Jana below so that you can go and follow her on social media. I'm actually going to stop today's podcast right here and leave the rest of this great conversation for next week because it was really long. But next week we'll be talking about our issues surrounding being working mothers and nutritionists, some of the things that we face and deal with. Some of the things that we love about it and some of our struggles. So I hope you'll come back and join us for that. We will also be talking a lot about estrogen dominance and some other health issues that her and I both share. So that should be interesting for those of you with hormonal imbalances. So I hope you'll come back for part 2. If you have a second, please leave a review for the podcast on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the podcast out to new listeners. And thank you so much for joining today. Hope you have a really good week, and we'll talk soon. Bye.